Hi everyone, it's Andy from Hobby Headquarters. Well, I told you in the last video that I was going to go ahead and start painting the new 16 scale Werk Panzer III J. And what I thought I would do is kill two birds with one stone. I created this video to be a more in-depth look at painting and weathering German armor in North Africa. And since I had two test subjects, especially in big scale to do it with, I thought this is the perfect opportunity to share that with you guys today. So this video is going to be all about the painting and weathering. Obviously you can see I'm not completely done with this vehicle because we don't have the tools and stuff all on it yet, but this is all going to be about how to do the weather effect on the tracks, how to do the chipping, all that other kind of weathering that you'd find on a North African German vehicle. So I think you'll enjoy this. I had a lot of fun doing this. That's my favorite thing, is the painting and weathering. So this was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to share it with you. So let's get started. Before I start weathering and painting, what I thought I would do is give you a complete breakdown of the different paints, washes, and pigments that I'm going to be using on this build. To start off with, we have on the left, we have the three paint colors that are going to be for the base of the model. We have XF59 Desert Yellow, XF57 Buff, and XF69 NATO Black. That is going to be used for the rubber as well as the shadow effect. And behind that, I have a can of TS80 Flat Clear from Tamiya. And then we're going to use Ammo by MIG for all of our washes and pigments. To start off with, we're going to be using Brown Wash for German Dark Yellow, which is AMIG 1000. We use Light Rust Wash, which is 1004. North African Dust, which is 3003. We have Golan Earth, which is a nice kind of like medium type dirt color, which is 3026. We have Streaking Grime, 1203, and Gunmetal, which is 3009. There is one other wash that we're going to be using. It is going to be Streaking Rust, which is 1204. Unfortunately, I don't have a bottle of it right here in front of me, but I'm going to show you a picture of it right now. 1204 is the last one. And finally, we're going to be using Ammo by MIG's Chipping, which is 0044. This is a great paint for doing all the chipping effects, as well as the based rust effect for the tracks. But I'll be showing you that all in a few moments. So let's get started. And to start off with, I am using NATO Black XF69 from Tamiya, but actually any flat black will work. I happen to like the NATO Black because it's a great rubber color as well. So while I've got it out, I can also do all of the rubber effects on it. And we want to take the airbrush and go over any of the panels or crevices or cracks, anywhere you want to create a shadow effect on it. And when we go ahead and put the Desert Yellow color on, you will see we'll put it on light, but we'll still be able to see some of the black come through. Now I'm taking Tamiya's XF59, the Desert Yellow, and I'm putting it on very lightly. We're doing light little circular coats on here, not to hide all of the black that we just put on. And you might have to put 2 or 3 maybe light coats on over it, depending on how heavy you go with it. But as you see, as we start to put it on here, that you can still see some of the shadow effect left over on it. And that's very important. You don't want to put it on very heavy-handedly, because if you do, you'll basically just be covering up all of the black that was already on there. We need to remove the turret and obviously get underneath all these areas. I had the turret on just for effects to show you what the vehicle looks like with it, but we want to definitely get all of the areas painted very well. And obviously we want to get the wheels done. I don't have the outer rubber on this particular one already, but you could also go ahead and mask it off, paint the insides of the wheel itself. The nice thing about using this desert yellow color when you're doing North Africa is any overspray, if you already have the wheels done, actually kind of acts like a desert sand dust coat on it. If it's very, very light, it's got to be very light to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up painting all of this in the desert yellow, and I will show you what it looks like before we go on to the next step. Now I'm using XF57 buff, and we're using this as a lightning coat still. I'm going to go over all of the high points, the areas like in between the cracks and the crevices to create a light effect. The shadow coat creates some nice shadows, but I want to have a little bit more of a faded paint job on this particular vehicle. So with the buff, very lightly, we're just going to start spraying all of the center panels, areas that you would think would get a little extra sun and would fade the paint out. And sorry about the fact that the camera keeps focusing on my airbrush and not the kit, but you can kind of see how it's starting to fade out lightly in all those panels. And this is kind of up to you, how much you want to put on, how faded you want it to go. I'm going to put it on all the areas in through here. It will... Okay, so here we have the example of what the vehicle looks like with the paints basically all completely dry. I've also gone ahead and sprayed the entire model here with Tamiya's TS80. They're flat clear, and what that does is it seals the paint job, so any type of weathering we do on top of it, we don't have to worry about damaging the paint underneath. But hopefully you can see the shadow coat as well as the lightning effect from the buff all in these areas in here. And that really makes things all kind of pop out quite a bit. The first weathering step we're going to do is the chipping effect. And because I didn't have any decals for this particular kit, I kind of forgot that that would actually be the next step. So before you do any chipping or any other weathering, I would definitely advise putting the decals into place. Now, I went ahead and found some decals that would work for this particular model. So you might see them suddenly pop on later on in the video. But normally you would put the decals on at this step. I've gone ahead and let the lacquer clear coat dry overnight. We've got a nice hard durable surface now. And now we're going to do a little chipping on top of that. So what I have here is Ammo by Miggs number 44, their chipping color, and it's kind of like a dark brownish red color. It's kind of what I've mixed up in the past using some of the Tamiya paints, but I like this because it's already ready to go. And we're going to take a little bit of that and we're going to put it onto the tip of one of these sponges here. This is the same type of material that the foam sponges that you find at the hardware store, the throwaway type, are. A lot of times you can just find just a big chunk of this foam too. I have got stacks of it myself, and I've kind of torn it to a little bit of a point there, and that's just so we have some good control. We're going to dip the tip of it in, and then maybe you can see it down here on the edge of the paper. We're going to blot quite a bit of it out. We don't want to put too much on all at once. And then we're going to zoom in here and just show you how we start to chip this up. See if I can do it without keeping my hand out of the way too. And hitting all of the areas that you think that are going to get wear and tear on them. You know, guys sliding off the vehicle, sliding equipment off the vehicle, the desert sands blowing against the vehicle, all that kind of stuff just tearing through this paint job that they have. And you can see right away that foam just puts such an erratic pattern on there, and it really starts to look like chipping. Very, very easy. And obviously it takes a while because we have a big 16 scale vehicle here, and the object is to do a small amount at each time, not trying to put too much on at once. Because if you do, it's a lot harder. You have to go back and paint over it with your base color if you decide there's an area that is just too strong. just going to keep. And I'm not going to do too much, just areas that I think that would have lots of wear on them there. And here is the other model. I actually went ahead and chipped this one up first, and hopefully you can get a good idea what I'm talking about, where the patterns would be. Think about when the guys are dragging stuff off the turret, it's going to chip off the edges here. These kind of edges are going to get chipped. Hinges, handles. In fact, I just noticed I got to put a little bit on the twist handle here. Also, bolt heads stick out, so those are going to get slightly more wear. So it's your way of doing it, however you think. If you think it shouldn't be chipped up, hardly at all, put very, very little on. But I like to have it kind of beat up for the North African vehicles. I think it really makes them set up differently, or set apart, I should say, from the standard type model. So I am going to go ahead and finish up both of these right now, and we'll come back and show you what they look like. Okay, let's start putting some of the other weathering now over the chipping. I'm going to start off here with a clean brush, and I'm just putting a little bit of odorless mineral spirits or enamel thinner on an area. We want to keep the area wet that we're going to be putting all of these products on. So I'm just going to wet this whole area down here. Then we're going to use a real fine tip brush, and starting off with a touch of streaking grime, and we're going to just kind of tap these little areas here. Putting some of this grime on, as well as a little bit of the lighter rust color. And put it on kind of thick here. And obviously you can do bigger areas, small areas. I'm kind of just showing you a more compact area here to show you what we're doing. And then we're going to go back to that big, fat, thin brush or clean brush, dipped in enamel thinner, and then we're going to start blending this in. You can start by tapping on these areas, and right away it'll soak up some of the wash, and it'll kind of blend it together. You can also use it to streak down to create some longer drip marks on it. Create a little bit bigger one right here. Another thing you can do is you can put it on kind of heavy like that, come over with some thinner, and just tap it. And you'll see it starts to run down. Wipe some of the excess off, and then blend it out of there, just so you keep a thin And as for the flat areas, like the top of the turret, same thing. You can blot on a little bit of the colors, and then some clean enamel thinner. Just kind of blend those together, just like that. Wipe off any excess. And you'll see it'll start to fill in all of like the little screws, any of the weld seams, all of that kind of stuff. And this is obviously going to take a little bit of time, and you just go back and forth blotting it. And any of those little micro streaks, hopefully you can see those pretty well on camera right there, that it looks like the bolt started to rust a little bit over the weather, and as the rain came or whatever came on it, dripped down just a little bit. And that is what we're basically going to be doing over the entire vehicle as a first step. Now, back to the decals. I don't have the decals on the side. I couldn't find any big decals for this particular one. I do have some for the other model, but I did have the national insignia, the German one, that I've put on this vehicle. So maybe later on we'll put some other decals on the side, or I might just leave them off completely on it there. So those are the first two colors that we're going to do. We're going to use the streaking grime and the light rust and go over most of the vehicle just like that. And I'm going to do that right now, and then I'm going to come back and show you the next steps after that. And here is that same side. And the only other thing I'm going to do now is real lightly, we're going to use that rust streaks from ammo, which is a real dark rust. And we're going to just blend in a little bit around some of the areas. Not too much on this particular step. Once again, the clean brush. And mainly over these big areas of a lot of chips. I think it just blends in nicely. And anytime you have areas like this that you want to bring down, just using a real light touch. Just drag it down. And hopefully you can see as it starts to dry, like in these areas here, we start to get just like a dirty effect, like the vehicle's been used quite a bit, been out in the elements. Now, this portion here can be done a lot of different ways. I showed you the three basic colors that I like to use: the streaking grime, the light rust, and then the dark rust effect. And even the dark rust doesn't really even always make it look like rust. It can sometimes look like some of the dirts and stuff that'll build up on the vehicle. Only slightly areas like in through here, you can see a little bit of the lighter rust on there. But they're a nice, good blend. There also are some, believe it or not, some streaking grimes that are of a tannish gray color, and they kind of look good for watermarks, things like that. I'll sometimes use that, but on this particular one I wanted to go with more of the brown tones on it, and you'll see how it starts to get dirtied up. I'm going to show you on the back of the vehicle here to take a little bit of the brown wash and just go over and highlight each one of those little nuts and bolts. And it really makes them pop out quite a bit. And obviously I've put a little bit of thinner down. That's why it looks wet to begin with right there. It just allows the wash to flow a little bit better than if it was a dry surface. And you can see they're just popping right out. And then of course when it dries, it'll dry flat, and you'll have some really nice looking highlighted bolts. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of the different pigments, the Golan Earth as well as the Desert Dust, just a little bit of it. We're going to mix it with some enamel thinner and some brown, just a touch of brown wash. We're going to come up with this kind of like thicker, not paste, because we put quite a bit of thinner in because we want it to flow. And hopefully you can see it start to form on it there. And what this is going to do, once it dries, it's going to create the effect of dust deposits. And I'm not going to put a lot on, just in certain areas we want it to look like some dirt is accumulated and hasn't come off. So just in a few little areas here and there, like up on this edge here. And it kind of blends right in at this point, but once it dries, you'll see quite a bit of difference on it. Now, the last thing I'm going to do, and this is the one that makes it look really grungy and grimy and dirty on it here. And what I'm going to show you is kind of figured this out on accident. So I've got this bottle of odorless thinner that I use quite often, and it has all of the washes and pigments when I clean my brushes. That's what I cleaned it inside. Well, rather than throw it away and get a new one, I have a separate bottle for clean one. But you take this, take your brush, give it a little tiny agitation at the bottom there, and then I like to take this and just blot it on. And it is very, very subtle. It looks a little bit darker right now because it's wet. Remember, once all this stuff dries, it has a tendency to lighten up quite a bit. So just going on and just blotting this little bit on here and there really adds a nice little overall dirty effect to it. Go over it and just kind of any of the top areas, any areas where guys would be walking on the skirts, anything like that. When it dries, it really, really pops out quite a bit. So I'm going to go over and do that just mainly on the top surfaces like the fenders and mainly on the top of the turret, but really makes it pop. Now let's work on some tracks. Now I've got my old beat up paint table right here because this does make a little bit of a mess, and you're going to see I've got two pieces of track here. The very first set of track is this one right here. I've gone ahead and just painted the entire thing with NATO black. That's very first step. Second step is to take your chipping color that we showed you earlier, 44, and lightly mist on a coat of the chipping color, and you can see the variation in color hopefully, and it just creates a nice little base of tarnish on there. So I'm going to remove this one because I still need to paint this one later. And the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to take a little bit of, show you to your right here, a little bit of streaking grime, and we are going to go ahead and start blotting that on in just a random pattern. And this is kind of like in the art circle when you do wet on wet, and that's what you want to do here, because we are not going to allow this to dry at all. We want to immediately start putting other things on, and we're also going to put a little bit of light rust on. It kind of just blends together here. And then the very first pigment I'm going to put on is the track rust. It's a darker pigment, and it's going to kind of give the effect of a little bit of a texture to it. And you just start blotting it on. And I know it all looks like it's just blending together, but you'll be absolutely amazed when you see how it dries. So now let's clean off our brush in some enamel thinner and just get most of that off. And we're going to dip into the Golan Heights, or Golan Earth, I should say. And pretty heavy. And we just want to start packing that on here. Just start pounding it into the surfaces here. Quite a bit of that powder. Just like that. And I promise you, I know it's all just blending into one monotone color, but it will look different once it dries. We're going to use a little bit of our North African dust now. And that I want to go real light on. I'm just going to sprinkle that because that is very, very light stuff. And we're just going to tap that on here and there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry for about 20 minutes. And you're going to see how the color variation starts to pop out in it. So I'm going to let this dry for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to come back and show you the next step. As you can see here, the track is starting to dry, and you're starting to get different tones on here. What I'm going to do now is I've got a little bit of black panel liner from Tamiya, and we're just going to take it and just in a couple of little areas, just tap some little dots. And this is going to break up any of the areas that look a little too one tone, too monotone. And I like to do it around the connecting points. This is still drying in the middle right here, but it's dry enough that we'll be able to put this on and it shouldn't blend too much together on it. And also, we can take a little bit of our rust pigment and just in a couple little areas, excuse me, rust wash. This is that dark rust wash. Just put a few little spots here and there. And after a little bit more blending and some more drying time, you'll get something that looks like this right here. Now, keep in mind, these are the spare tracks that I'm doing, so I put quite a bit of extra weathering on them because they're designed to look like they've been sitting on top of the vehicle. They're exposed a little bit more to the elements in the sense that they're not being dragged through the dirt. As the vehicle moves, it's taking off a lot of the excess weathering and rust, things like that, because it's being constantly sanded off. Whereas these are just sitting on the vehicle and they kind of just sit out there and get all that stuff just accumulate on top of them. So it's totally up to you how weathered you want the actual tracks on the vehicle to look like. These are how I'm doing the spares. I'm going to do a similar process for the actual tracks, just a lot lighter. And there you go, guys. There is a look at the weathering and paint job on a North African German tank from World War II. You're looking at pictures right now from the two different vehicles that I'm painting. These are not complete models. As you can see, I have not put any of the tools on or some of the other little accessories. I think it's much more important to do all of this weathering before all of that gets put on, because it's kind of hard to do all that weathering around many of the tools or the tow cables, things like that. But there it is. I plan on doing some more work on these vehicles, and obviously these are the Das Werk 1/16 scale Panzer IIIs that will be coming out very soon. But I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to show you how North African armor is weathered, at least for German armor, I should say, and give you an idea how that goes down. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you as always for watching, and please stay tuned because we have many more videos coming.